We're going to start with Anthony DeBundo because he is the little Philly fanatic that we need to get us started and get ready for the 118th World Series that gets underway on Friday. Look, Anthony, I know you know this. The Astros are the significant favorite here at minus 190 over at BetMGM. It's their fourth trip to the Fall Classic in the last 6 seasons. Phillies are plus 155 at BetMGM. Phils are back in there. You know all this. They're back in the World Series for the first time since 2009. They won it in 08. How do you assess from a big picture standpoint? We know the pitching matchup for game 1. It's Nola v. Verlander, but how are you attacking this series? And probably a way to bet your Philadelphia Phillies. I'm aware of that, but give us your preview, how you go about looking at this series.
Yeah, the biggest advantage that the Astros have over the Phillies is their pitching depth. So starters number 1 and number 2, Nola and Wheeler for the Phillies against Verlander and Valdez for the Astros. You don't see too much of a difference between those 4 pitchers. They're all relatively comparable. The Astros will be at home, but you have to think that the Phillies have a decent chance of getting at least one game in Houston in those first 2, given how strong those 2 pitchers have been, not just all season, but especially in the playoffs. Wheeler's only allowed 2 runs in the playoffs. Nola did get blown up in San Diego, but prior to that had pitched 19 innings without allowing a run. That included 6 2/3 against Houston at the end of the regular season. So you like the Phillies, the first 2 games, to potentially get a split here. But the biggest difference between what the Phillies have done in the last 2 series, where they dominated the Braves and dominated the Padres at home, is that the Astros have a lot more pitching depth than those 2 teams. Of course, the Braves had Spencer Strider, who was coming off injury. Charlie Morton got hit with the line drive, wasn't the same after that. And the Padres didn't really have a game 4 starter with Mike Clevenger not recording an out. So the difference here is that the Astros have a huge pitching edge in games 3 and game 4. And I think that's going to be the difference in this series. Ranger Suarez will start game 3 for the Phillies. He would also be in line to start game 7. And I like Ranger personally, but this is a really bad matchup for him. He gave up 6 runs to the Astros at the end of the regular season in 3 innings. The lefty righty split against the Astros lineup is really bad for him. Houston dominates lefties. So if you like the Phillies and you want to bet the Phillies, I actually think it's better to bet them minus 1.5 games because Wheeler and Nola will start the first 4 of the first 6 games. You don't want a game 7 situation where Houston will have 2 or 3 really good long pitchers available, and the Phillies will be throwing Suarez with a lot of question marks behind him. I know it's one baseball game. Anything can happen. But I think if you like the Phillies, chasing a minus 1.5 plus 270 is a better bet than playing just their series price at plus 155, plus 160. Again, because in a potential game 7 in Houston, the Astros could have Christian Javier going, who is a dominant right-hander. Phillies will be going in a much more difficult pitching situation.
This Wednesday is only halfway over, and I've heard a lot about Ranger Suarez, way too much in this.
Love Ranger.
Go talk to our friend Colin Whitchurch. We did payoff pitch earlier this morning. He likes long shot pick to win World Series MVP, which now I ask you, and he meant long shot, by the way, for the record. But speaking of, World Series MVP is a fun prop to look at for a World Series. You're pretty much trying to find the guy that stands out the most over the course of the best of 7 series. How do you personally go about trying to find value on a World Series MVP, and who do you like?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult to predict because a lot of times it's the luck of who comes up in the big spot, who comes up with runners on base, and who gets that big hit. And, there's a lot of variance and randomness and volatility in trying to predict that. But there's one name that I've been targeting a lot of these playoffs and thinking about if the Phillies got there, he would be a guy that I would want, and it's Rhys Hoskins. Hoskins' entire career in Philadelphia has been summed up by peaks and valleys. He's been an incredibly streaky hitter. When he's hot, he's one of the hottest hitters on the planet. And when he's cold, he looks like he can't hit in major league pitching. And we've seen that in these playoffs. The first two games against St. Louis struck out most of his at-bats, but it looks like he's starting to turn the corner. He's got that home run swing back. He had 4 hits in the NLCS. All 4 of them were home runs. He is well built for both ballparks. Of course, his home park in Philadelphia is a big hitter's park, but he also gets the Crawford boxes in left field on his pull side. That benefits Rhys, who is a heavy pull hitter for power. Hoskins has the ability to get hot, hit enough big home runs. And I do wonder, if Harper hadn't hit the home run, if the Phillies had just gone on to win that game 2-1, and they hadn't blown the lead and then Harper hits the home run, Would Rhys Hoskins have been NLCS MVP? I think he would have. He had the 2 home runs in game 4 and would have had the game-winning home run in game 5. So the way he's playing right now, I think Hoskins is my favorite long shot. He will get matchups with a couple of lefties in Framber Valdez. So it's not a terrible matchup for him. And when Hoskins is hot, he's very tough to get out.
Yeah, it feels like the public money could come in on Harper because of the momentum from
he is the favorite, even though
round. Yep.
Even though the Phillies aren't favorites.
Right. He's the favorite of Phillies players at plus 700. Then Alvarez for Houston is at plus 600. Those are the 2 front runners right now for World Series MVP.